Hi everyone, it's Michelle. Welcome back. So today I thought I would do a little bit of a different type of video. Got a hair hanging on my mascara there. Okay. And I would talk about what I've read recently. So I post always on Instagram when I start a new book, and sometimes while I'm reading it, I'll post how it's going and that kind of thing. And I get a lot of people who ask me to talk a little bit more about what I'm reading and what I think of the books and that kind of thing. So I thought I would try to maybe do a series, maybe once a month come on and talk about, what I've read over the last month. Or if you guys really like them, maybe I'll talk about them, the books as I read them. Who knows? I thought I would start by saying I read a very broad range of books. I read a lot of nonfiction. I read a lot of fiction. I love memoir. This year, 2015, last year, I guess, I even read a little bit of magical realism, which I would not have thought I would have liked, but I really did. So there will be more of that in 2016. And the other thing that's coming in 2016 is I've sort of been delving a little bit into fairy tales and fairy tale retellings, and so I've kind of been loving that. So I will probably talk about that a little bit as well. And for those of you who are thinking fairy tales, why would you want to read fairy tales? First of all, fairy tales are not what you see on the Disney screen, for sure. Most fairy tales are very gruesome and very dark, and there's a lot of books that are sort of fairy tale retellings that are really dark, and as they've modernized them, they make the women in them more powerful, or more, they make the women much stronger in them than, you would see sort of, the handsome prince rescuing the fair maiden, not so much of that in current retellings. So I will talk about that probably a little bit in 2016 as well. So let's jump into what I read over the last month. These are the books that I think I read over the last month, and I read a lot. There are 5 books I'm going to talk about. I read quite a bit over the last month, so let's jump right in and get started. The first group I'm going to go through is, well, we'll just go book by book and I'll talk about them. So the first one I want to talk about is a nonfiction book, and it is called the Bookshop book. So because I haven't really talked about what I love to read much, I will talk a little bit about that. I love reading anything that has to do with bookshops, libraries. I like fiction and nonfiction written about bookshops, stories that happen in bookshops, stories about writers and that kind of thing. And this book is lovely. This is by Campbell. She is a UK-based author. She also makes YouTube videos, so I will link her channel below. She makes videos about books. She reads a lot of books. She's written several books. She crosses all genres. And it's always interesting to hear her thoughts on a book. But she wrote this book about 300 different bookshops around the world. And so it gives you a little blurb about all these bookshops that are in all these different countries. There's some author blurbs in here about, how the authors feel about that bookshop or some of their favorite bookshops and that kind of thing. And I love this. And I was very excited. Actually, I was very excited to see the bookshop that I shop in mentioned in this book, so that made me very happy. I also noted a lot of the bookshops here in the U.S. so that if I'm traveling, I can stop in and see them. I do want to read the little blurb about my bookshop. So I'll read a little bit about my bookshop. So mine just got listed in the Some Wonderful Things, but the Lake Forest Bookstore in Illinois was started in 1949 by a group of local women who wanted to provide books for their local community. And over the years, it's grown from 650 square feet to 1,800 square feet. In the summer, author events are held outside in the town square. It's a lovely bookstore, and I will say that next month they are moving to an even larger space, so good for them. And if you think about that, women starting a bookstore in the 40s was a very a very gutsy thing for them to do. And it's been in operation ever since. So it's in a small town near me, and I love to shop there. So this is a fantastic book. You can get it on Amazon. If you want to buy it from Jen, I will put a link to, she doesn't know who I am, but she has a blog. I will put a link to her blog where you can buy the book from her directly. She will ship it to the US. I think she'll ship it anywhere in the world. And she will sign it for you, which is always nice. So I bought a signed copy. Has my name, says to Michele, lots of bookish love, and signed by Jen Campbell. So I loved this. She's also written a couple other books. And again, she has a fantastic YouTube channel where she talks about books, and I will link that below as well. Okay, that was kind of a long one. Okay, the next one, I'm going to talk about the books that I read over the last month first that have to do with bookshops. And you won't always see this money, but for some reason right now there was. So the next one I read was called Time Was Soft There. And I chose this, I've owned this book for quite a while, and I never got around to reading it. And I chose it because it's nice and small and light, and when I was traveling at the holidays, it was easy for me to carry. So that's why I chose this. Anyway, it is called Time Was Soft There. This is a memoir written by Jeremy Mercer, who is was a Canadian reporter. Something happened to him and he felt like he needed to leave the country. So he ran off to Europe and ended up living in the bookstore Shakespeare and Company in Paris. And that is something that has happened throughout the history of Shakespeare and Company, the bookstore. It is still there. It's been there for a very long time. Writers and artists end up living there and working there and that kind of thing. They actually physically live in the bookstore. And so it is about his story of when he was living in the bookstore. I enjoyed reading this book because I love reading about bookstores, and I love reading about anything about Paris, the French people, characters, anything that has to do with France, I pretty much read it. So this gave me a double whammy with it being about a bookstore and about the French people. So I will say this was a good book. It was an interesting read. There was a lot of really interesting characters in here. I think if you enjoy reading about like real places and real people, you might enjoy this. But I thought the author was, I don't know, maybe a little self-indulgent with the story. You know, he did all these things and he kind of talked, I think he just sort of spoke very highly of himself. And quite frankly, he was a down-on-his-luck writer who, you know, was living for free in this bookstore and trying to figure out how to get by. But it was an interesting read. I don't know if I'd recommend it, though. I don't know. It was okay. Just okay. And the last one about books that I read is called The Little Paris Bookshop, a novel. So this book was a gift to me. This is by Nina George. I believe this is her first. She was a journalist, writer, and storytelling teacher. Oh no, maybe not. She writes novels, feature articles, short stories, and columns. The Little Paris Bookshop spent more than a year on the bestseller list in Germany. So this was a gift to me, and again, a great book for me because it is about a bookstore, and it is it is based in Paris. So this is a novel. It's not a true story, but it was a really, really cute read. It there's a little bit of a love story here. There's some mystery here. The main character is trying to learn some things about himself and some things that people he used to know, and that I don't want to give too much away and that kind of thing. And it was really, really cute. I was trying to see if there was a little blurb I could read you. His bookshop, I will say the bookshop is based on a barge in the Seine. So he owns a barge that is a bookshop in the Seine. It's not a real place, which is too bad because it would be really cute if it was. And it's about, kind of what happens. There's a lot of antics in this book between him and some of the other characters and that kind of thing. I thought it was a really fun read. If you're looking for a light read, a little light love story where you get to learn a lot about the characters, this is a great read. I loved it. I loved it, really. It was a cute, feel-good kind of read. Okay. I also read a couple of mysteries. So the most recent thing I read was a short story called The Grown-Up by Gillian Flynn. And she is the person who wrote Gone Girl and Dark Places and Sharp Objects, all of which I loved. She's actually a local author, lives here in the Chicagoland area. And she wrote this very short story, 60 some pages it is. This is a little bit of a ghost story. I don't want to give too much away, but in the beginning I thought I'm not going to like this. It was a little bit shocking. And then at the end, it totally sucked me in and made me wish it was not a short story and that I could learn more about what was really going to happen. So let's see, I'll read you a little blurb. A canny young woman is struggling to survive by perpetrating various levels of mostly harmless fraud. On a rainy April morning, she is reading auras at Spiritual Palms when Susan Burke walks in. So she quickly realizes, you know, that this woman is troubled, obviously, by just looking at her, and sets out to help her. You have to remember, this person is a con artist. And so this is a book about her trying to help this woman rid her home of ghosts. And kind of what happens during that process. And like I said, she's a con artist, so this isn't what she does, and she gets sucked into it, and then it's sort of about what happens. And then in the end, it left you with a lot of questions, and I really wanted it to continue so you could see what the truth really was about the whole thing. Anyway, it was great. I highly recommend it. It's very short. I'm sure you can buy it for very, very cheap. I think I found mine at Target or something, and it was like in the, I got it, you know, Target does the 30% off stuff. This was really good read. You could just get this on your Kindle or whatever too. And lastly, the last book I want to talk about is another thriller, and this is called What She Knew by Gilly McMillan, I believe is how you say it. Again, this is a thriller. I will read you a brief. The other thing I will be very careful of during these discussions is to not give anything away. I don't like, you know, there'll be no spoilers. Anyway, the New York Times says it's an amazing, gripping, beautifully written debut. So this is her first book. I'll read you a little blurb about what it is about. Rachel Jenner is walking in a Bristol park when her 8-year-old son, Ben, when he asks if he can run ahead. It is an ordinary request on an ordinary Sunday afternoon, and Rachel has no reason to worry until Ben vanishes. So this story is about trying to find out what happened to Ben. They're basically walking in a, you know, like a forest preserve kind of area, and he runs ahead, he disappears, and this is the story of finding out, following the characters as they try and find him and find out what happened to him and that kind of thing. And during the process, this is a very easy read. So it's very straightforward writing. You know, there's not really long sentences with tons of big words and that kind of thing. So it's a very easy read. It's very long. It's almost 500 pages. I felt like it could have been shorter. I will say that, but the characters in here are all really interesting. They're all sort of screwed up. Even the good guys have bad things about them. And so throughout the book, there's a lot of twists and turns as you're trying to figure out what happened to her son. You know, there's a lot of people involved. There's, you know, she's divorced, so there's her husband. There's her husband, you know, her husband is remarried. You know, her family is kind of screwed up. She's kind of screwed up. And it's sort of about everything that happens, and as you learn about the characters, and, you know, because the police are investigating, so you learn about people through the police investigation. And I will also say this deals a little bit with what happens in the media and in social media. So there's a social media aspect to this, and, you know, where people start talking about her as being a bad mother because her son disappeared, and you know, how the media feeds people information, and then social media runs with it, and how it influences cases, and all kinds of things, really. And so I thought it was a really good read. I thought it was maybe a little bit long, like I said, but it kept me interested. It had enough twists and turns. It made you care about the characters, like, you know, even the characters that were really like messed up, you kind of cared about what happened to them, and you wanted to know what happened to them, and that kind of thing. And, you know, you were rooting for her along the way, and for them to find her son, and and that kind of thing. It was really, I liked it. It was really good. I think it's definitely worth the read. So I would definitely recommend this as well. I would give this like 4 out of 5 stars. Yeah, I would definitely recommend it if you like that kind of story. So those are the books I've read, you know, most recently. So hopefully you guys found this interesting and helpful. If there's anything else you kind of want to see in these, let me know in the comments. Also, if there are any books that you recommend I read, let me know. I will say I have quite a few books already that I need to read, so I'm going to try not to buy any books and just go with what I have to read. I will say my tastes in writing is starting to change, which is why I think I'm leaning into genres of writing that I haven't been interested in before. Like I never would have read anything with magical realism in it. And for those of you who don't know what magical realism is, it's a story that has some element of something that isn't quite real in it. It's not complete fantasy. So like in Harry Potter, it's complete fantasy. Like everybody has these powers and things. But in magical realism, there's typically one thing about the story that is magical or maybe dream-ish. And so it adds sort of another element of interest. And I like that. So I feel like, especially like the more mysteries you read, like my thing with mysteries is if I can predict who did it or what's going to happen, and then that's what happens in the end, it kind of bothers me. And so I've been looking for books that have little different twists in them because then there's so many other things that could come into play, right? The other thing I will say is, like these two books were written all the books I mentioned were written very straightforward, very simple writing, easy to read and that kind of thing. And I'm starting to enjoy more, which I never did before. I'm starting to enjoy more, or to look for books that have really beautiful writing in them, which I would have considered hard to read in the past. But as I read books that have really beautiful language and beautiful writing in them that makes you really sort of be able to become part of the story or really just sort of surround yourself with the story, I love that. And I think that's another reason I'm sort of going to start leaning towards some of this fairy tale retelling and stuff like that. So more to come on that if that interests you. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to mention. I think that is it for today. Again, if there's anything different you'd like to see me do in these videos, let me know. Also, if you want me to do them like as I finish a book, so I'm just talking about one book, then it would be a much quicker video and I could talk a little bit more about it. I would be happy to try to do that for you as well. So that is it for today. I hope everybody's having a fantastic day and I will talk to you all again soon.